Sana Ball is greater than best ball. You heard it from me. Welcome back to the Ion Cricket as we review the England versus Sri Lanka Test series. We have two regulars on our show, Nick and Mark, back here again. They've followed the team throughout the three tests in the UK. It's a pleasure, as always, to have you two back on the Ion Cricket. And Mark, I'll open this up with you. What was the immediate reaction to Pathum Nissanka's masterclass on day 4 at the Oval?
Oh, Viren, you called it Sana Ball. I want to call it Byler Ball. That's what they were calling it at the Oval, because we were dancing around South London the minute that ball was struck for these winning runs. I mean, it was just absolutely glorious. The minute, so I think I want to start kind of telling the story from like day 3, because I think what happened when Sri Lanka lost wickets really early, when DDS got out and then Kamindu got out, is you kind of felt, oh no, here we go again. But then when we came into bowl, it was just like absolutely breathing fire. Kamara just started the party, and then Vishwa picked it up, and next thing you know, England were like all over the place. It was 69 for 6 at one point, I think. And then you're kind of thinking, with Jamie Smith at the crease, because Jamie Smith's knock will be forgotten because England lost, but that was quite an incredible swift 50, and you're kind of like, oh no, maybe they've just done enough to pull it over the line. And then Pathum came out to bat with Dimuth, and I'm a big Pathum Nissanka fan, right? And I've been talking to loads of people in the English press about how I think he could be he's the big talent in this team to watch out for. He's the next one off the kind of production line of Sri Lankan greats, or destined for greatness. And then he kind of, in his last opportunity, like all good Sri Lankans, he takes a while to turn up, but when he turned up, oh boy, did everyone know he would come to the party. And it was just absolutely brilliant to watch. And I felt, actually, him and Kusal, if there was an extra kind of 15 or 20 more overs that night on that final day, they probably would have knocked off the runs, because bad light stopped play at kind of 5:30. No, I think it was about 5 to 6. It meant that we came back the next day, and next day, obviously, Kusal lost his wicket, and it was kind of nice in a way, because I think that probably likely was Angelo's last time playing for the national team in England. Unless, things fall a certain way, and then maybe he's back playing at Lords, but definitely playing against England in England. So I was thinking, in a way, it was kind of nice that Angelo was at the crease when it all happened eventually.
Well said, Mark, and thanks for giving our viewers an insight into what it was like being at the Oval. Nick, Kusal Mendis, there's been talk of his role in the Test side. That cameo on day 4, or on day 3 rather, was the kind of template I'd like to see Kusal Mendis playing at, because he's not someone who, we've seen him be very tentative early on in Test knocks, but that cameo of 39 off 37 took the pressure off Pathum at the other end.
Yeah, totally. And the way that Pathum especially batted, but Kusal too, on that third evening, they turned what could have been a really tricky chase of around 200 into something that looked like a walk in the park. And you're left thinking, how many could Sri Lanka have chased down? I think you're right, Viren, to touch on the fact that Kusal can often be a slow, tentative starter, not just in Test cricket, but we've seen the same in white ball cricket, right? I think Kusal Mendis is a fantastic player, but I think it's clear that he's had issues during the course of this series. Sanath said as much in his press conference at the end of the third test, that he said, look, there were a lot of technical issues coming back to red ball cricket that we needed to iron out, which was clear from watching the work that he was doing with Sanath and Ian Bell in the net. Some of the exercises looked like sort of more basic stuff than you'd expect an international cricketer to be doing. And, he was getting out, pushing at balls outside his off stump, kind of not moving his feet or moving his body away from the ball. But you're right. On the third evening, he played a great counter-attacking, punchy, aggressive knock. He's so fluid when he gets going. I just think, and the more I watch him through this series, the more I've felt it, that he's being misused at number 3. And I would like to see Kusal Mendis as this team's wicketkeeper batter, batting probably at 6 or 7, coming in and scoring quick runs when the ball is moving less, probably batting more with the tail, so he's got license to express himself. I just see that is the crucial role for him. And I mean, how often do we see him score really lovely flowing 30s or 50s, but not go on to big scores? And Sanath said that he thinks that's a mental thing, that now the technique is fine and that everything's in place for him to make big runs. But yeah, I do feel that his long-term future should just be as a lower middle order batter, probably taking the big gloves. That's what I'd really like to see.
And a follow-up for you, Nick, in terms, you go from one Mendes to the other. Coming to Mendes batting at number 7 throughout this series, there's been a lot of discourse on where he should bat in our batting lineup. Batting as low as number 7, he provided us with some stability after a few collapses. Do you see him batting at number 7 in the short run whilst Matthews and Chandimal are still in contention / still in the side? Or would you like to see him being given a promotion ahead of the New Zealand series?
I think that this is not a straightforward debate, and I understood the logic of leaving him at 7 through the England series. If something's working in a batting lineup that has issues, you don't necessarily want to change the one thing that's going right? But too often he was put in a situation where a ship that had developed loads of holes, Kamindu had to come in at 5 down and plug them. In the second innings at Lords, he came in at number 8. And I think that everyone can see plain as day that long term, he's far too good a player to be languishing down at number 7. He's got a great technique. He's clearly in a really good run of form, and he's got a clarity in his thinking that some of the other batters don't seem to have right now. He knows what to defend and what to attack, and he's really clear in his technique and his process. I have no idea how they're going to fix this situation in the short term. I wouldn't mind seeing a straight switch between Kamindu and Kusal. Kamindu bats 3, Kusal goes down to 7. I know a lot of people are against that they think that shunting Kamindu from 7 straight up to 3 is throwing him in at the fire. I think at home that he should be able to handle that. He has batted 3 in A-team cricket, but I also see that possibly he's more suited as a sort of aggressive stroke playing kind of batter to batting at 4 or 5. I think there's a lot of promise. There's a lot to be excited about with Sri Lanka's batting, but I think that the looming kind of issue that the team is going to face is if Angelo, Chandimal and Dimuth all go together, then you've suddenly got a very experienced batting lineup transforming into one which looks much more callow. And I think that there needs to be some discussions with those guys in SLC about how they're going to structure that, how those retirements are going to be phased. And Angelo's 37. He's played a lot of cricket over the last 3 weeks and at times looked pretty tired and sagging in the field. I wonder if there's a strain of thought that says maybe he can just take a rest, not retire, but have a rest during the New Zealand series and give Kamindu a chance at 5 to see how that goes, maybe while bringing someone else in to bat at 6, whether that is, Sadira or Nishan Madushka or someone from outside of the squad that went to England. But yeah, I think ultimately, Viren, I would like to see Kamindu batting higher than 7 during the New Zealand series. I don't mind where that is. And I think it's clear that his long-term future is certainly in the top 5.
Can I just add something to that as well around where Kamindu bats? I think there's 2 things that are worth noting. I think over the last few summers, England have given a lot of runs away to kind of lower middle order batters. That's how Australia retained the Ashes last summer and how New Zealand beat them the summer before that. And I think Sri Lanka kind of maybe identify that that's possibly the area in which England get tired. Or aren't able to, for whatever reason, aren't able to take wickets. I also think in too many innings, if you look back at that series, it kind of almost didn't matter where he batted because he was still coming in within about kind of 15 overs of the innings starting, right? When you're, 6 for 3 in that first morning in Old Trafford, it was, he was in batting just after lunch, wasn't he?
Before lunch, I think they were 5 down.
Yeah. So you're until there's a kind of almost a bit more stability. I think it's almost like a bit moot to this even discuss kind of moving him around, right? I think feel like at Lords there was 100 on there for him, Marky, if he didn't run out of partners.
Yeah. I mean, I know it is still fairly moot, But yeah, I mean, I feel like he was kind of robbed that first innings 100 by the fact that he had to slog when Asitha came in. Although I think people should have more confidence in Asitha's batting. He played some great shots at the Oval.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that, Nick. I think you're right. I think though that they need to start thinking about how they're going to manage the senior players, because we saw last time when Sangha Mahela and Dilshan retired all pretty close to each other, it caused a huge hole in our batting lineup. I don't think necessarily. I mean, we have no idea if Kamindi can bat at 3 effectively or not, right? 3 is a problem position for a number of teams in the world at the moment, and has been since Test cricket began. You don't necessarily want to get everyone's hopes up that he's the man to do it and put him in there and him totally lose form. Because how many times as Sri Lanka fans have we seen that happen in the past, right? If it's not broken, don't cause more problems by moving things around. I forgot what I was going to say there, but you know what I mean.
and that goes quite well with Merle's question. Our co-founder Merle poses a question: what's the future for Angelo and Chandi? And I'd also like to include Dimuth in this discussion as well. I don't want lightning striking twice with 3 senior batters all retiring roughly at the same time. We saw that with Dilshan, Mahela, Sangha, and Samaravira. It left a huge void in our top and middle order. Just chipping in with my take on this, I honestly think out of the 3, I'd like to see Dimuth prolonging his career for as much as possible. I think, especially at home, in Asian conditions, he's someone who could thrive. He's been brilliant away in South Africa and New Zealand as well. So give him a bit of a longer rope. Angelo's fitness concerns come in, and we saw Chandimal putting in the hard yards in this Test series. Being a gloveman in England is not easy with the Dukes, and I thought he did quite well whilst he was fit in both Tests that he was given a go at. He was brilliant with the bat as well. But we also have youngsters in the 4 now. We have Chaminda Wickramasinghe, who could be a like-for-like replacement for Angie, very competent with the bat, and has Angie's pace as well with the ball if required. Nick, I'll pose this to you. Do you think it's time for us to start looking ahead to the next generation, or should we allow Chandimal, Angelo, and Dimuth to try and prolong their Test careers for as long as possible?
I think this is a really difficult conversation, and there's no straightforward answer, because you'd have to say that those guys are still contributing. I know Dimuth had a quiet series and possibly doesn't like English conditions this much, but I think Angelo and Chandi both made really crucial contributions during the course of that Test. I think especially back to Old Trafford, when all seemed to be kind of lost, and the guts that they showed both batting alongside Kamindu was really crucial to Sri Lanka staying in that Test. But I think this team's got to have an eye on the future and has to be thinking long term, and all 3 of those guys can't go together. And the likelihood is that we're surely going to see a drop off from Angie's batting in the next couple of years. I mean, he's a good 3 years older than Chandi and a year older than Dimuth. I do think that sooner rather than later, you have to be looking at getting new guys into that middle order, whether that's, as you say, Vera and Chaminda Wickramasinghe, whether it's Pasindu, whether it's Nuanidu, whether it's, as we said, Sadira or Madushka. There are a lot of guys who are around the side, and you don't know whether they're going to sink or swim until they get into Test cricket, right? We've seen it with Kamindu, where he sat on the fringes of the side for a long time. And I think there was a kind of narrative amongst fans and observers of, oh, is Kamindu going to be another one of these could have been kind of wasted talents? And then he gets into the team and flourishes. So, I mean, until you try someone else out, you don't know what you have in reserve. And I'd like to see Sri Lanka embrace a bit of that spirit of experimentation. I understand with the World Test Championship, there's a feeling that you need to win every test. But I think, at this stage, I'd like to see, I don't mind Angelo sitting out a test during New Zealand if it means giving someone else a go and seeing what's there.
It's quite painful watching Angelo Fields, isn't it, Nick? I mean, you kind of you want to run into the field and be like, Uncle, I'll get the ball, don't worry.
You feel like his body's being held together by sort of like pieces of string, right? He looks like kind of a Pinocchio running after the ball. And it hurts watching it.
I do think I said this in stuff that Muraliend has done as well. So that I'm not coming onto your podcast to hide a controversial view, but I do think there's a scenario where if Angelo keeps playing, it ends up being quite sad to watch because he's an all-time great for Sri Lanka, and you kind of wanted to go out in some kind of form, right? Not just because he's having to be retired. We've seen that there's a few players that's happened to in Sri Lanka's history, and it's always quite tragic when that happens. He doesn't need to do that. In 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years time, people could still be talking about him. He's, arguably our greatest seaming all-rounder ever. So, he still makes my all-time 11. And I think somebody, in the way we saw the ECB do with Jimmy, somebody needs to sit down with him and be like, what's the plan? How are we doing this? I think with Chandy and Dimmer, the situation's slightly different because they're able to move a lot freer, and Angelo just cannot run. And I don't think there's any amount of him going to the gym that is going to change that. I don't know. Maybe there's some surgeon somewhere that can fix it. But I mean, it's if there is a fix, it's going to be a really long fix. That he's going to come back, and then who knows how long it will be before he breaks down again. So, but the one thing I will say is he did show in Old Trafford and at Lords that he still can bat. Right, and the Oval as well.
You guys are both spot on, and I think you're right, Marky, that a conversation needs to be had. And you both are right again to touch on Chandy's keeping, which I thought was actually pretty superb, especially during the first test. He had made some really, really good takes. Actually, that was the only test he kept him, wasn't it?
And
a bit at Lords.
And before we start heaping praise on our awesome quartet with the ball, and we'll get to a bit of comic relief as well, linked to Lahir Kumara's antics with the bat later on. But Mark, coming to you once again on this discussion of Angelo, there seems to be an over-glorification of Angelo's involvement and performances in the side. And I refer to instances where he'll come in and bowl for 2-3 overs, get the odd wicket, and you have all news channels in Sri Lanka speaking about the fact that he has to be utilized more with the ball, etc. My question to you is, I agree there has to be a discussion on his future, potentially a discussion on certain formats that he should retire from, because he's still made himself available for across all three formats, had a subpar World T20, potentially maybe his last appearance in the T20 side in my books for a while. My question to you is, it's important, yes, to retire when you're at the top. We've seen greats of the game know when to call it quits. And when it comes to Angelo, do you think there's also this worry that we highlighted earlier about the vacuum that he leaves behind in that middle order? And do you think that's why he's prolonging his career for as long as possible until we find that suitable replacement at number 5?
I think the problem is, right, he's such a big player. He's so important to the team. He's done so much for the team for such a long period of time. I just cannot see how somebody comes in unless, I mean, occasionally players do come in with really big reputations in the way that kind of Harry Brook came in for England, or I suppose to a degree kind of Patton Masunka was kind of talked about for a while before he made the side. But unless someone like that emerges, I just don't know. Like most Test cricketers, or people who have good Test cricket careers, do not come into teams fully formed, right? This idea that you're going to pluck someone out and they're going to just replace Angelo, it's just it's basically not going to happen. There's a 1 in a million chance of that, 1 in a billion chance of that happening. You have to come in, you have to learn how to play Test cricket, you have to learn how to play 5 days. I think in general, when you watch England versus Sri Lanka, both those teams are really bad at kind of batting time and taking time out of games. That's why all those games are finishing within inside 4 days. The Oval nearly finished inside 3 days, right? So they've got to come in, they've got to learn their craft. People will listen, Sri Lanka fans will listen to this and be like, we need to get our domestic system better. And yeah, I'm sure we can do. But actually, that's a challenge they have all around the world, right? They talk about that in Australia. There's a Sheffield Shield prepare people. They talk about that about county cricket. Now players basically don't even come through county cricket to get into the England side. They talk about that in the West Indies. They don't really have a kind of first-class structure that the way other places in the world do, apart from India, who, you know, the Ranji seems to be able to kind of churn out these players. Nowhere else in the world are people coming in fully formed. So I think it's gonna, at some point, it will be painful, and I think we need to start, or not. We can talk about it till we're blue in the face, right? The people who run the show, SLC, need to start having those conversations. They might be having those conversations already. We don't know what's going on in the background, right? So they might be talking about it and going, "What's the plan? Who's taking over?" I think now it's interesting when you're around, especially DDS in his press conferences. He mentions the World Test Championship a lot, and I think they see it as a 2-year cycle. I think this squad, more or less, is what the squad's going to be till either they're knocked out or they can't mathematically make the final, or this cycle ends. Is what my kind of gut feeling is with it all. I don't know what you think about that, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, I would be very surprised if Ange isn't in this New Zealand series and doesn't play both tests. I think what I would say, though, is Viren and I were talking off air before we started about the Pakistan losses last year. And I mean, how much better does the team seem to be in terms of position than it was then, given the emergence of Kamindu and the restoration of Pathum? I mean, I think suddenly you're looking around this top 7 as really solid, with also, you know, Dimuth, who's going to score runs at home, Chandimal, who looks in great form. He's kind of had a resurgence the last couple of years, and DDS, who's always reliable in that lower middle order. So, I mean, the batting, as I see it, is in a great place, and I can't think that it'll be in a better position anytime in the near future to blood new talent. That's the only kind of strain
Sorry, I've lost Nick.
Wouldn't it? Because
yeah.
Sorry, Nick, we lost you there towards the end.
Okay, sorry, no, yeah, I was just saying, yeah, that the batting's in a really good place to blood someone new, and I don't think it'll be in a better place to blood a new player. But I feel that, yeah, it would still be harsh on Angelo to drop him now, because he can still make contributions, right?
And just chipping in with looking ahead to the rest of this particular World Test Championship cycle, just today the SLA side beat South Africa A quite comprehensively in South Africa. Oshida Fernando, going back to 2019, was an unsung hero in that series away in South Africa. Our final away series in this World Test Championship cycle is in South Africa. I'd potentially like to see him back in the fray. Yes, it might be a short-term pick, but he's been to South Africa before. He's thrived in those conditions. Maybe someone we could have just to even have as bench strength if needed to take with us to South Africa. And my final question on our batters, it's a quick-fire question to Mark or Nick. Kamindu's century in the first test or Pathum's century in the third, which stood out for you more? For me, Kamindu's consistency throughout the series was brilliant, but just as a one-off knock, and given the significance of the knock as well, Pathum's century stands out for me. Mark?
Pathum for me, only because it was match winning, right? And that's, you know, that's kind of harsh on Kamindu, because also Kamindu had to bat with the tail as well. I think you can make arguments for both, but I'm going to go with Pathum.
And Nick?
I missed the question, Viren. Sorry, my internet's playing up. Was it which was the better innings?
Which was a better knock, yes, in your eyes?
Oh, it's so hard. You're asking me to pick between Kotu and Blackport Curry. I love both so much.
Blackport Curry every day. Blackport Curry every day of the week.
I think I narrowly have to go with Pathum as well. That some of those strokes on the third evening were just absolutely glorious, and the way that he paced his innings, the way he sort of came back on the fourth morning and looked quite resolute and very solid in his defense, and then, you know, once he got the 100, went through the gears again and started hooking Ollie Stone into the stands, and it was the joyful match sealing innings. But that shouldn't take anything away from Kamindu, who I thought was incredibly resolute in defense, and, you know, some of those square cover drives were just a thing of beauty. I think that was the confirmation for everyone of what.
Sorry,
Oh, we lost Nick.
We lost Nick. Mark, moving on to our discussion on the awesome quartet, the Seamers. Prior to the first test, going away to England, and playing 3 back-to-back games, my initial worries were linked to the fitness of our bowlers, the fact that we didn't have too many in reserve. We've always had issues with our fitness going away, but they survived the 3 tests and did really well. My first question to you is, and I think credit is due where credit is deserved, Sanath and the think tank came up with a left field solution to our issues with the ball, leaving out Prabhat in that final game. A Sri Lankan side without a frontline spinner. I can't recall the last time that's happened, but all 4 of our seamers complemented each other really well. And we also had a discussion, and I've seen a lot of discourse with English podcasters plus Sky cricket analysts on the reckless nature of baseball contributing to Sri Lanka's success. But our bowlers stepped up when it was required, and it was a brilliant effort by all 4 seamers. What's your take on their performance throughout the series?
Firstly, I think we've got to salute the Sanath and co, whoever made the decision to pick 4 seamers, because as you say, I mean, a Sri Lanka team without a frontline spinner is just unthinkable, right? It's basically, I think the last time it happened, I think was kind of in pre-colonial times. I keep asking people, when was the last time that it's happened, and no one seems to know when it was, right? So to do it is quite extraordinary. Sri Lankan cricket's at its best when it's making tough, weird, strange decisions, right? And I think, we saw lots of different decisions they made, like the decision to bowl at Lords when they won the toss. Felt like a strange decision, but Sri Lanka's we're just different. It's a different type of cricket that we play. We've got to find different ways to win, and that's what they did. I kind of wonder though how Prabhat might have taken it, like, because he probably would have been expected to play all 3 tests, and then he didn't. And also, I think he kind of didn't do too badly in the other tests. I mean, compared to Shoaib Bashir, I mean, Bashir was getting smashed to pieces by our batters, and Prabhat wasn't anywhere near that. He wasn't taking the wickets. The 2, those 2 wickets he took at Old Trafford, was that the first day? I think it was the first day. Were absolutely unbelievable. And yeah, I do feel it was a bit tough for him. I also think, Nick knows more about this because he's been talking to them, but you've got to give some serious kudos to that fast bowling school that SLC are running, because you look at it, right, and you're like, Milan is. There was a question came up yesterday when we recorded Murali End, where someone asked, should he be playing white? Should he be in the white ball squad? And I was like, I reckon he's about 8th or 9th choice in the white ball team, right? Sri Lanka don't just have 4 good fast bowlers. If you look at it as a whole, as a wider squad, there's about 10 really quality fast bowlers come through now, and like, we've never had that. Play a fast bowling 11. Do it.
That might be our next go-to. And Nick, I'm going to pose the same question to you, linked to this conveyor belt of fast bowlers. Off air, we spoke about Chris Silverwood's tenure. I wonder whether there was a link between him trying to really amp up our fast bowling conveyor belt. And we have players like Isita Vijay Sundara, who picked up a 7-for in South Africa yesterday, also in the mix. But I want to give kudos to Milan Ratnayaka. He went in. He went in as a debutant on day 1 at Old Trafford. We threw him in the deep end. It was a baptism of fire for him. And yes, he was the least effective out of the quartet in my books throughout the series. But he chipped in when required and got some crucial breakthroughs. And when the game was kind of drifting away from us, he always stepped up when DDS brought him on. So yes, an honorary mention for Milan Ratnayaka there. What stood out for you in terms of the quartet? Yes, Asita Fernando was the shining star, but the other 3 chipped in when required.
Yeah, I mean, I think a few things stood out for me. Something which hasn't really been touted on or touched on as much as I think it should is durability, right? playing 3 back-to-back tests in unfamiliar conditions, being asked to bowl more overs than you're accustomed to at home is not an easy thing to do. And so you've got to really big up both Asitha and Milan for their ability to get through the workload they did. And Kumara as well, you know, to play 2 back-to-back tests. He's known as a guy who's been a bit brittle, a bit inconsistent, can be a bit all over the place. So, you know, I think he exceeded expectations there as well. And then, I mean, look, you look at the first day of the.
Oh, we lost them again. There's a storm going over it went over my place about 5 or 6 minutes ago. So I think it's probably over Nick's place now, and I think we'll be done. He'll be free on the other side of it very shortly, is what my suspicion. But maybe that's what's kind of knocked his internet out.
Yeah. And Mark, chipping with what Nick was saying earlier on, if you look at what Lahiru Kumar etc. did in this series, yes, he's known for carrying niggles throughout series etc. But as Nick was saying, 3 back-to-back tests, they all pulled through quite well compared to the English bowlers who seemed to struggle on the final game. But bear in mind, England had 6 back-to-back tests. There wasn't much of a break after the West Indies series. And my question to you is, and this was something that was really nice, and this is for a bit of comic relief on the show. There was a certain dialogue and exchange between Lahiru Kumara and Vishwa Fernando when Ollie Stone was giving them some bodyline, a hint of bodyline when they were batting. And Sangakkara gave us a PG translation of what was said on air on Sky Cricket. But it was very nice to see as a Sri Lankan fan, because it seemed like we were combating fire with fire. We weren't stepping down. We were stepping up to the challenge. And it was nice to see a bit of aggression from our end to kind of out-Baz ball, so to say. And my question to you is, if looking ahead to that third innings, and I know a lot of pundits, and I watched your episode with Jared Kimber as well after day 3 at the Oval. A lot of pundits seem to just put it down to the reckless batting by the English. But I want to microanalyze that certain passage of play where Harry Brook was being getting frustrated by the 6/7 stump line that our bowlers were utilizing. How pleasing was it to see some planning and some strategy behind trying to bog down Harry Brook that eventually led to his dismissal?
Oh, it was absolutely beautiful, right? The thing is that when you start to kind of be around the team, around the test match, as I say that, I mean, just going to the press conferences, you realise they've got plans for everything, right? So they're coming into it, because sometimes when you're watching it on TV, you're like, what are these idiots doing? Why do they keep bowling the same stuff, serving the same stuff up to these guys? The 2 things you don't realise is they've obviously got a plan, except that for whatever reason the plan's not working, right? Maybe suddenly Joe Root's develop a different shot, or Harry Brook or JB Smith can suddenly play isn't getting, it's not working. The other thing is you realise is how grueling it is playing that much cricket. 5 days is a hell of a long time to play a match, right? And that's obviously part of the task as well. So when it all came together, and it came together right at the end, I just felt I was absolutely ecstatic for the boys, because also there's a kind of big now, like you might have heard me being interviewed on other shows, kind of English facing cricket shows, and people keep saying, what will this mean for Sri Lankan cricket? And I keep saying, well, probably not much. I mean, Sri Lankan cricket existed beforehand, and it's going to exist now. Yeah. It's not like, do you know what I mean? It's not like they're qualified for the Champions League, or it means they'll be able to go out and buy new players. Sri Lankan cricket is alive, well, vibrant, and healthy. The reason we haven't been where we once were is because we've got a different batch of players and possibly a different batch of administrators. So, there's lots of other reasons for that. But one test win in London doesn't really mean a huge amount for the grand scheme of things, apart from the kind of morale of the players and what the boys will take into the series against New Zealand and going forward.
Very well said. And I want to highlight the fact that, and one of my worries ahead of this series was the fact that the English batters and their aggression would take the game away from Sri Lanka. But in all 3 tests, there were certain passages of play where we were very much in contention to winning the game. So during that first test, that 4th morning when I was messaging you whilst you were at Old Trafford, when Cummins and DDS were on song, had we posted another 50, 60 runs there, that would have been a bit of a challenging target in that first test for England. Looking ahead to that second test, moving forward to that second test rather, having England 6 down at tea on day 1 kind of justified DDS's decision-making to send England into bat. And the game just drifted away thereafter, thanks to Gus Atkinson. And even in the third game, that second innings display brought us right back into the mix. And that was something that was pleasing to watch as a Sri Lankan fan, that England weren't able to out-blitz us or blitz us out of the game with best ball. And my question to you again, linked to our seamers, is we have Akib Javed in the mix now. We have Sanat Jayasuriya, Upul Chandan, Athilina Kandambi in the think tank. Players who are perhaps a tad more relatable, and coaches who are a tad more relatable than having an overseas bunch of coaches who might not be able to convey the necessary messaging to the bowlers. One thing that was pleasing to see was the other seamers rallying around Milan when things were getting a tad tough. You saw Asita, Vishwa coming in and chipping in with a word every now and then. DDS speaks about the fact that this is a very, very tightly packed test unit. It's a tightly knit unit. They've been playing cricket together consistently for a while. Looking ahead to the rest of the World Test Championship cycle, Mark, I know we're going to rely on Prabhat in goal for the 2 tests. We're going to rely on Prabhat again in the home test against Australia. But do you potentially see an avenue where we play all 4 seamers in South Africa if required, with DDS and Cummins chipping in with the ball as the sole spinners?
I think so. I think now that we've done it once, I think we won't be scared to do it another time. Obviously, South African pitches are very different to British pitches, and also they are, because of climate change, some of them are starting to work differently to the way they used to historically, right? So I think it's a case of, we've got different horses with different courses now, which is absolutely superb and brilliant. And we're just going to make sure that whichever touring squad goes has all the different options that they need. I do wonder if, because I think I saw Nick talk about this on social media, if Madhushankar is fit and available. I don't know whether or not he could bowl 15 to 20 overs in a day, but if you could potentially use him as a kind of Mark Wood or Jofra Archer type player to come in and get wickets early in bursts of 2 or 3 overs, whether they might be tempted to take someone like him along if we get to, if by the time we're on our way to South Africa, we're still in the running for this big match in London that's happening next year.
And I'll definitely be there for that in 2025. Sri Lanka makes it, Mark. And my penultimate question on our fast bowlers before we look at the series as a whole. I want to kind of own in a bit on what you just said. In terms of role fulfillment, Mark Wood's omission from the series played a crucial role in my books. He was the only seamer we couldn't seem to get behind, purely because his pace is not something most of our batters are used to dealing with. My question is, provided Nuwan Tushare is fit, Matisha Patirana, Dilshan Madhushankar are fit, you just hit the nail on the head there. Perhaps give them the role that Mark Wood plays for England. Come in for just 3-4 over bursts, replicate a T20 kind of spell, just bowl your 4 overs and give us something to play with. Is there a possibility of expanding on this quartet and bringing in 5-6 seamers into contention? And purely because we don't have any series prior to our away series prior to the series in South Africa, I wonder whether they'll have any opportunities to prove themselves in this format prior.
I wonder if whoever's looking after those players and whoever looks after them, are they able to bowl a full? Would they bowl? Could they bowl for a day? Like, how many overs can you realistically get out of them? I think that's the question that we need to ask. I can't remember the last time Madushanka would have bowled over 10 overs in a day. I'm sure he would have done it in his time, but can he do it now? What long-term impact is that happening on them? If you look at England, the reason why England are struggling to be in contention at the top of that World Test Championship table is because they can't manage the bowlers, right? They're going to Pakistan, Mark Wood's injured. They broke Jofra Archer, and there's a lot of people in England who kind of seem to think the long-term plan is to get Jofra Archer fit to play in Australia. I'm not sure Jofra Archer's bank manager wants him to play Test cricket ever again because financially it's a bad decision for him to do it, right? So, and I don't think this is about whether or not somebody loves that. Do they love their country enough? Are they patriotic enough to play it? I think it's about being pragmatic and realistic, because if someone breaks down during a test, that leaves a huge problem. If you've gone in with full seamers, for example, and someone breaks down, what the other three and the part-timer's gonna try and pull it together. I mean, I don't think you're getting more than 4 or 5 overs out of Angelo in a day. So they need to work out what impact the load would have on whoever they brought in to play, whoever they brought in to kind of be that main strike bowler for them. Has Patarana ever played any long form cricket outside of being at school? I doubt it, right? Yeah, so it's quite a big ask, right? Because it's a totally different.
And I think the same applies for Noah Tushar as well. And I think the fact that we don't have the Champions Trophy next year might allow us to prioritize this particular World Test Championship cycle and even risk taking 1 or 2 of those players who are assets in the white ball game to South Africa if requested. My final question on our bowlers, and this bleeds into our fielding. Upul Chandana seems to have an effect on our fielding. I thought our fielding was miles ahead of where England's was over the course of the 3 tests. There were some absolute blinders taken by Milan Ratnayaka and co. And our glove work was brilliant. Dinesh, Nishan Madhushka, etc. performed amicably with the gloves. It's nice to see a Sri Lankan unit fielding well again. We had that. We were top of the podium in the mid 2000s to the late 2010s, and we kind of our fielding standards dropped significantly as the rut deepened in Sri Lankan cricket. It's nice seeing us back there. And it was nice seeing the other pacers supporting one another out in the field as well. Was that quite refreshing?
Yeah, it was unbelievable. Milan's so athletic. He's an absolutely great fielder. It's brilliant to see. I just always think with fielding, it's like, people talk about controlling the controllables. You can't control the balls you're going to get that you face as a batter. You can't control that, Jamie Smith's suddenly going to, well, to a degree, you can't control that Jamie Smith's suddenly going to go crazy and start hitting everything out of the park. But you can control the fielding, right? That is something you do have control over. You can make sure that it's going to all work. So that's what they've worked hard on it, and they're paying dividends for it. And I think you're right. I think they were the best fielding side, or the better fielding side. So, and yeah, it's good. Just keep going, keep doing it. Don't. Too often, I feel sometimes with Sri Lanka is that they play well in moments when they think that they kind of sniff victory, and it's when the chips are down that you're like kind of looking around, going, "Come on, someone do something." And I kind of feel now they're coming off this series in a bit of a high, going to New Zealand. If they can somehow get 2 wins, then who knows what could happen.
I'm sorry, Nick's just messaged us saying that he has a few technical issues. He'll be back for our next show. And Mark, before we wrap up this show, and I want to have a bit of controversy here. We saw a lot of English pundits taking the mickey out of Sri Lanka after the second test. Michael Vaughan spoke of a 2-tier structure to test cricket. But if he wants to break the 2 tiers up using the current World Test Championship table, Sri Lanka would be in the top tier and England would be kind of in the second tier based on his kind of permutations. My question to you is, and I don't think Sri Lankan pundits as well highlight the successes of our test team in the recent past. We narrowly missed out on the World Test Championship final in the last cycle. Had we won the series away in New Zealand, we would have we would have replaced India in the final against Australia last year. And our side has done really well, both at home and away. in the current cycle, except for that 2-0 drubbing to Pakistan at home, which was unexpected. Would it be safe to say that this is Sri Lanka's best format right now? And plus, where do you see us going forward in this particular format? Do you think there's an avenue through which we could retain this core of players for one more cycle, the likes of Dimut, Chandi, and Angelo? Or do you think come the end of this cycle, regardless of where we end up, it'll be time for the next gen to take over?
Right, so I'll answer the cycle bit first. So I think they've got to, as I said earlier, I think they've got to start having those conversations about where these players are, how well what physical shape will they be in kind of 2 years' time, or kind of what the end of the next cycle will be 3 years' time, right? I think they need to. I don't know enough about them and the data that's been collected around it to kind of work that out. They've got to try and figure that out. They've got to have the conversations with, someone's got to say, we are thinking about what happens post Dimmoth, right? In terms of, is this our best format? I don't know. It's really difficult, right? Because now we're very clearly at a stage, and I suppose actually Sri Lanka have been here for almost forever, where our teams play very it feels very different. The white ball team feels very different to the red ball team at the moment. I think the white ball team, I know the results recently in terms of major tournaments hasn't been going well. We've become kind of bilateral bullies, but I don't think the white ball team is as far away from being a top team as it seems sometimes when you look at the results. I also, on the flip side, I think that we can't get too carried away with this one win, coming away from a series loss 2-1. We're not Bangladesh, right? We're Sri Lanka. We exist to win test series. So we, it's a difficult one. I know we all feel euphoric at the moment. I mean, the whole 2-tier test solution is actually a symptom of the issues with English cricket, right? Because, as I said earlier, cricket is alive and well and vibrant and healthy in Sri Lanka. There is no problems with trying to get people to watch it or drumming up public interest, or there's no end of talent on the island and interest, and people interested in our talent, right? In England, that's not the case, right? They are fewer every year. There's fewer and fewer people coming to test cricket. What they've become almost now reliant on the opposition bringing away fans. So next year, when India arrive for 5 tests, they'll sell that all out because the Indian fans love their team and will come and watch them. I'm interested to see what happens the next time England host the Ashes in terms of ticket sales, because I think the fact that England has the ECB have a large broadcast contract with Sky, it's papering over a lot of cracks. But the next time they need to negotiate that contract, they will get less money than they did this time round, and therefore that there is a lot of problems with English cricket. Some people who talk about the whole 2-tier thing aren't having a bird's eye view of cricket and don't realise that the issues England has are basically at this point unique to England. It is no issue getting interest in cricket anywhere else in the kind of rest of the member nations. So some of it you've just got to cut. Like as Sri Lanka fans, I think you just got to kind of just go, these people don't know what they're talking about. It's silly white noise. And the whole 2-tier thing will ultimately, if it ever did happen, and if they did, they're basically the kind of conversation is cutting it in terms of financial resources, not in terms of talent or not in terms of interest, right? And if they ever did that, that'd be basically the end of English cricket, which, if I'm going to be honest with you, I think unless something dramatic happens, which might be IPL owners coming in to buy franchises, then I think we're at the fag end of English cricket as we know it anyway. And it because every year it's becoming a niche sport, but you might not notice that unless you're in England. Right.
And feeding off what you just said, perhaps that's what's kind of influenced this brand of cricket implemented by Brendan McCullum to make Test cricket more watchable, regardless of the situation, regardless of the match situation. We've just got to play all-out aggressive cricket to try and attract more fans to games. It was disappointing to see an empty Lords on a Sunday for that second Test. Yes, it clashed with Liverpool, Man United, and as Liverpool fans, the loss was kind of offset by a brilliant 3-0 win at Old Trafford. But my question to you, Mark, is, and I didn't want to harp on baseball too much because on non-Sri Lankan podcasts, they've zoned in on baseball over the past week. Do you think that has a part to play in it, the fact that you can't attract fans to Test cricket? Ticket prices are through the roof. There's obviously a structural issue with trying to get fans to watch Test cricket. And do you think that can be attributed to what Baz is trying to do with the English side?
Again, I think the problems with cricket in England are unique to England. I think the ECB generally does quite a terrible job running the sport in this country, right? I have literally been in a pub with Jimmy Anderson and people don't know who he is, right? Where he could walk into any pub in South Asia and people would know who he was and be ecstatic to see him, right? Their inability to sell tickets is a choice that they've made because they've decided that the price point is basically it's £100 a ticket to go to Lords, which is just, it's a crazy amount of money to charge when you're trying to sell 30,000 tickets, right? So I think I used to be, and in English media, I've been quite outspoken about how I think the game's run, and I used to think there was this kind of conspiracy to protect English cricket for only select people that they wanted to buy it. But actually now I just think they're incompetent. And that unless there's a dramatic change, it's going to kind of wither away, and it's kind of broadly withering. I think, what they're trying to do at Bazball is actually, like, on some levels, it's like, I don't think it's anything new, right? I think Sri Lanka, South Africa, Australia have all had periods in the past where they've played this type of cricket, right? I think that the messaging around it, I think, is a kind of roll of the dice to try and get people more involved in it. One of the problems they've got is selling tickets on the 4th and 5th day, right? And actually now increasing the 3rd day. And I do think Bazball doesn't help that because, like, if you look at the Oval Test, that finished early because England batted badly, basically, right? So, I mean, you could, and I think the nature of playing Bazball is going to make that 5th day more and more obsolete. I mean, next year Zimbabwe coming for a 4-day test, right? Which I think both sides will bat twice in that. They didn't need 5 days in any day this summer. I think they only needed it a couple of times last year against Australia. So yeah, like, Bazball's interesting. I don't think it really means a huge amount. Like, I don't think it's as innovative as English cricket fans might be led to think it is. And I'm not sure what its long-term impact is on Test cricket. I just don't think, like, if you're a fan of Test cricket, you're not that, like, very few people get to go to all 5 days, or going, I'm going to buy 5, like, gonna make myself available to all 5 days. That most people at some point, the vast amount of people, 99.999% of the people at some point will be following the game on the scorecard, right? They're not going to sit and listen and watch to every ball. So that's why I'm a bit like, it's a bit moot that the style of which they're playing it isn't the problem. It's the marketing and the messaging around it that needs to change.
Very well said, Mark. And our final question before we wrap up the show, just wrapping up the series and reviewing the entire series as a whole. This was our first 3-match series in England. Was it a good advert for Sri Lanka cricket? And do you think we will get more series in England in the near future, and the rest of the SENA countries as well? We've been striving to get proper 3-match test series away from home, not in South Asia, but in South Africa, England, New Zealand, and Australia. And this was our first real test to see if we could deliver and stand up to much stiffer opposition. In my books, I think this series was a success on that front. I think we did deliver, and I think we did pose a threat to England in all 3 tests. but because you were at the games, you followed all 3 games. You were in Manchester, in Lords, and at the Oval. What was your take on it? And do you think Sri Lanka cricket stands better for this as well?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, Viren, right? I think that we shouldn't just be trying to persuade the ECB to give us a 3-test series or a 5-test series, right? Sri Lankan cricket has existed for a long time now, right?
Yeah.
We've done everything that we can do, and we did it mainly, but mostly before England even managed to do it, right? So I kind of think if they don't want to give us a 3-test series ever again, fine. Like, as I say, Sri Lanka people will still continue to play cricket. Sri Lanka will still have great players. If it the boys did really well. I think, it wasn't like it was uncompetitive. There were points in the game where they should have done better. They let the game get away from them. But I think if they come back, if they have another 3 or 5 test series in 2 or 3 years' time, I think they will be better and they will improve. What I would really love Sri Lanka to get, what I think would be amazing, is if Cricket Australia let us play the Boxing Day test. I think that's what everyone wants as well, right? Like, can you imagine 45,000 screaming Sri Lanka fans in the MCG? Like, it would be so good. It would be so good. I think that's what we all want. I like England going up to a cold, damp Old Trafford. I've done it now. Like, I'd obviously, when they went, sorry, not England, Sri Lanka doing it again, I will go up and support them. But I think there's more exciting places for Sri Lanka to play cricket. Obviously, I want all of our great cricketers to have a shot at playing at Lords because they deserve it, and that's great. But it is what it is. Playing at half-empty stadiums in Manchester, I don't think is a great advert for anyone, right? But yeah, I think they've done enough to get another series.
Yeah, and seeing us play at the MCG during the Boxing Day test would be great. It would be another R. Premadasa Stadium, or twice the size in terms of the number of Sri Lankan fans.
Premadasa on tour, right?
Premadasa on tour, exactly. Thanks, Mark, for joining us, and to all our viewers, if you haven't subscribed to the Murali End, please do so as well. And we look forward to previewing the New Zealand Test series with you. Mark and Nick will be joining me for that as well. Once again, Mark, thank you for your time, and we look forward to having you again soon.
Thanks for having me. Speak to you soon.